Good afternoon, everybody. Very happy that you're here. I'm just going to have a couple opening remarks and introduce our speakers briefly, and then we're going to get right to it. So on behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center and the Center for Urban Language Teaching and Research, CULTR, it's my privilege to welcome you to GSU's Global Career Series. This may or may not be the first time for you. If it is not, then welcome back. As you know, that this series brings together globally minded organizations to talk to students about the rewarding opportunities that await them in the international field, and we'd like to do our part for that. We're very fortunate today to have Ms. Alexis Butler from USAID and Mr. Alan Dubose from the U.S. Department of State. And today we're going to be talking about internships, employment, global skills, and professional development in the field. And we're really, really excited to have those two outstanding experts and very experienced international workers and people who've been in the field for a very long time. So it's just a great privilege to have you here. Just a couple of words about them. So Ms. Alexis Butler, she's a Foreign Service Officer with the U.S. Agency for International Development. Her current position is Development Diplomat in Residence, and she's based out of Morehouse College. In this particular role, she provides advice and career counseling to individuals interested in learning more about and or working for USAID. And Mr. Alan Dubose is the U.S. State Department diplomat in residence, and he's based here in Atlanta. He joined the U.S. Foreign Service as a management officer in 2005 after working in the private sector for more than 17 years. So there's some great and international, great overlay there, and I'm hoping we can explore this a little bit. Alan served abroad in Mexico and Ecuador and the United Arab Emirates, and he has also served domestically in assignments where he's traveled extensively throughout Latin America, Europe, in the Middle East. So before I turn things over to our speakers, just a couple of small housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded, so just that you know. We ask that you all keep your mics muted to reduce any noise. If you would like to turn your cameras on, you're more than welcome to do so. There will be at the end about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A after the presentations. And if you have any questions or any comments in the meantime, please type it in the chat and we will definitely address those in once the presentations have ended. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed speakers. And we're going to begin, ladies first, with Ms. Alexis Butler. So Alexis, go take it from here.
Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be back. Well, I guess I'm not technically back, but to be with you here today and talking about one of my favorite topics, which is working for USAID. So I'm just going to share my screen and get started on my presentation. In addition to what Tim listed as far as my background goes, I did want to just kind of clarify that I am also a democracy and governance officer with USAID. And so I will talk to you all a little bit more as I go through the presentation about the work that I do specifically, as well as the work that some of our other staff do who are filling different specializations such as global health or agriculture, economic growth, et cetera. So for a lot of people that aren't familiar with USAID, I like to start off with this kind of basic introduction, right? So we are the lead agency for foreign assistance for the US government, as well as the world leader in humanitarian aid. We are an independent agency, although we work very closely with State Department for policy guidance. And in the field, what you'll see oftentimes is that USAID's office is located inside of the US Embassy. It doesn't happen in every single country that we're in, but in most countries that we work in, we are co-located inside of the US Embassy. So our overall objective is to work with the countries and the communities that we're in to be able to address their own development challenges with little to no international assistance in the long run. And we call this the journey to self-reliance, which I'll go to on the next slide. But essentially, our three goals are U.S. national security, supporting U.S. national security, economic prosperity for the U.S. as well as for the partner communities that we're in, and then demonstrating the American generosity, which is something that I'm very proud of, I'll be honest with you, because being able to represent your country and do good and positively impact people's lives overseas is a fantastic opportunity and something that I've always enjoyed. As I already mentioned a little bit on the journey of self-reliance, but this is really, it's not a new way of looking at it, but it's a new way for us as a federal government agency to recognize that we can do better in getting the partner countries that we have been working with around the world into a position where they're in the driver's seat to figure out how they want to deal with an issue. As an example, we now work very closely with countries on disaster preparedness, and with the goal that if there is a disaster that strikes, those countries are the ones that are in the seat to decide who's going to respond and how they're going to respond, as opposed to the U.S. government coming in wholeheartedly with, the DOD and all of our workers, et cetera, to take over the space and then leaving immediately afterwards. And so we're taking a different look at how we go about that. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to this website, and these slides are up. I've shared these slides with the team, and so they have them available and can feel free to share. Some of the challenges that we look at in development are pretty big and multi-layered. And so these are just some of those challenges, right? Food security, not just food security during a disaster, because you want to make sure people don't starve to death, but also looking at food security long-term. Once you get to a point where they're not dealing with a disaster, you've got to figure out how to still feed the people in the country. And we want these countries to be able to do that themselves. So you got to work with the farmers, you got to work with the private sector. Water is another issue. This picture was taken in northern Kenya. And we often think about water for the people, but then water for the animals is not necessarily, is not always in a forefront. And so we think through these things. And water for agriculture, so for the crops, because you need the animals and the crops to feed the people, right? Environmental effects. This picture is taken in Haiti, where they had cut down significant amounts of their forests. And what we then saw happening in Haiti is that when hurricanes would come through, which happens every year because of the location of the island of Hispaniola, the effects of the hurricanes would not be felt as nearly as much on the Dominican side of the border as they would on the Haitian side of the border. And so how do we then work with them on the Haitian side of the border to not only replant the trees, but to address the behaviors that led to the trees being cut down? In this situation, they were cutting the trees down to make charcoal, which they would then sell, and the trees were seen as a free resource. And the reason they were doing that is because there were no economic opportunities in the area. So now we want to address that, but then we also have to address the demand for charcoal that's coming out of the capital city. So like I said before, these issues are multi-pronged, and there's multiple components that contribute to our responses to them. Energy is another one. A lot of people don't realize, in Texas right now, Tim and I were just talking about this. The lack of electricity is a huge problem. And you forget in the US often, because we don't have issues like Texas happening regularly, how inhibiting not having electricity can be if you don't have it. Kids can't study after dark. Businesses can't stay open after dark. So now if you can increase the access to electricity outside of the capital city, and a lot of these countries, you'll have electricity available for the most part in the capital, but outside of the capital city, you don't necessarily have as much electricity available. So how can we increase that? Urbanization. So this picture is taken in Bangladesh following the collapse of the Rana Plaza. And what happened in this situation is that in Bangladesh, you have about 170 million people, give or take a couple million, I think, which is half of the US population. Imagine half of the US population squeezed into a space smaller than the state of Georgia. What components come with that? And in this situation, you had bad building codes that were not very well enforced. The builder added 4 floors, an addition on top of the building. And unfortunately, a tragedy ensued where the building collapsed from the garment workers that on top of the garment workers that were in there. And you had hundreds of people dead, even more hurt. And it's a situation that could have been easily avoided by planning. And so when we look at urbanization, we look at multiple issues. It's not just the health or the economic effects or even education. In this one, it really is governance and how that plays out in this situation. Pandemic disease, everybody's familiar with COVID-19, and you all know right now that what happens outside the US very much plays a role in what happens in the US, particularly as it relates to pandemic disease. USAID has been at the forefront of responding to pandemic disease for decades. We've been working on the HIV/AIDS crisis, which is still a crisis in a lot of countries. Malaria has been another issue that we've worked on, Ebola crisis, et cetera. And so we're taking lessons that we've learned from those particular pandemics and applying it to the COVID-19 pandemic and using that to work with countries around the world to get them in a position where they can be better prepared when their case numbers start to go up, which we are starting to see happening, particularly in the developing world. I'm not going to go through all of my slides. I should just give you guys a heads up. And so when you get this, you can, if you have any questions, you can feel free to send me an email. But we are working in over 100 countries around the world. I have, in my experience, as Tim said, I've been all over in different places, but we do have officers who focus on Latin America, or who focus on Africa, or they may have learned Russian, and so they really want to work in Eastern Europe. And so it's certainly possible to design your career in that way with a regional focus, but always keep in mind that for USAID in particular, we have what's called worldwide availability. And that means that you go where we send you, you agree to go where we send you. And so when I joined the agency, I had spent the majority of my time, about 10 years plus, working on East Africa issues. And so I really joined the agency thinking, oh, I'll keep working on Africa. It didn't quite work out that way because the only time I've been assigned to Africa was in South Sudan in the 15 years that I've been with the agency. I'm so hopeful that one day I'll get back to Africa, but I don't think my career has suffered at all because I have been able to go to these places like Bangladesh. I did a short stint in Kyrgyzstan, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, places that I never would have gone had I really wanted only to focus my career narrowly on one region. And so I encourage other folks to just be open-minded when you think about, where you want to go when you're looking at the Foreign Service. Some of this is just a list of the different types of career tracks that we have on the Foreign Service side. And I should note a clarification as well. So if you are looking at becoming a Foreign Service officer with USAID, that means that you will be expected to spend the majority of your career living and working overseas. I'm going to go into civil service in a minute and just get to give you a difference on that side. On the civil service side, you're expected to spend the majority of your career living and working domestically. So right now I am doing a domestic assignment here at Morehouse College. Once I finish this assignment, I will be expected to go back out into the field to continue working as a Foreign Service officer there. So these are some of the positions that I've listed. I already identified mine, which is a crisis stabilization and governance down here, but we're always looking for people that come from a different background that have different skill sets. And so economic growth folks, these people tend to work with entrepreneurs and they'll be or sometimes they'll be working on policy to make businesses more, to make the environment more business friendly in the country that we're in. So if you've got a business background or, if you're an entrepreneur yourself, we're looking for you. Agriculture and environment folks, these folks are the ones that are dealing with the deforestation issue that I just mentioned, or on the food security issues that I mentioned. Education and training, I have to say that our education officers have one of the best jobs in the agency because they actually get to spend a lot of time with little kids because a lot of our education programs around the world focus on primary education. And so they get to go out, and really interact with these kids and look at the curriculum development, improving the educational outcomes, with the idea of that the more educated the population is, the better the economic potential is for that population. Health is about 50% of what we do at USAID. It includes HIV/AIDS. I mentioned some of the other pandemic disease components, but we also look at maternal and child health. We look at nutrition. We also look at water, sanitation, and hygiene. You know, the simple things of getting people to wash their hands regularly. And some of you may know that song, the theory that Dr. Fauci gave us, you know, sing happy birthday twice while you're washing your hands. Those are kinds of things that we teach people overseas as far as reducing the transmission of communicable diseases. Program and project development folks, these guys are a bit more the generalists for us. They are expected to kind of be a jack of all trades. They are responsible for our strategy development. So big, high level issues is what they tend to be looking at. I've already talked a little bit about I guess I haven't talked about what I do. So as a democracy and governance officer, I have been doing work on elections. That was my area that I really like to do. And not elections like you guys may be thinking, like our election that we just had last year. I was in the weeds on the really dorky side of elections. Like I wanted to know like the planning for the ballot paper and the logistics schedule, like how are we going to get the materials from the headquarters out to the ballot, to the polling stations, and then get it back securely. How do we ensure that women have equal access to the polling station? How do we take into consideration cultural components? For example, if we look at women, particularly in a lot of these developing countries, they really are the linchpin to their entire household. And so if they have to wait in line for 8 hours to vote, their entire family is going to suffer. So how do we alleviate some of those pressures in order to ensure that women can actually have equal access to the polling station? Engineers. People are always surprised that we're looking for engineers, but we're always looking for engineers. Half of these projects that I just listed include some sort of building or some sort of infrastructure work. And we like to have our own engineers who understand what we're trying to achieve from a development perspective on the ground and taking a look at these things before we actually start doing it, while we're doing it, and after it's completed, to make sure it's being used in the way it was supposed to be used, that it's not falling apart, so that we know that what we delivered was something positive and impactful in the country. Legal and contracts. If you are that person who likes doing, you know, the legal kind of paperwork stuff, you definitely should come to take a look at USAID. If you're a lawyer, but you want to get more experience internationally, definitely take a look at us. Financial management folks, if you're a CPA or you're interested in accounting, please consider us for a job, because the financial management folks are the ones that basically make a determination about how we spend the money and make sure that we're spending it the way we said we're going to spend it. All of our new officers are listed under what's called the C3, Career Candidate Corps. And so that's really just like your entry mechanism into the Foreign Service for USAID. Right now, this is the only mechanism we have to enter the Foreign Service. And so in ours is a straight application process. And another point that I should make on as far as Foreign Service goes is that we do require a master's degree on the USAID side. And part of that is because you're expected to be a technical expert in your area. That doesn't mean you have to have worked for decades in that area, but we want you to be well educated in that area. So if you have a Master of Public Health, you're certainly an expert in what you're doing, and we want to take a look at you. My master's degree is in international affairs. And so, you know, but these are just an illustrative list. That doesn't mean that these are the only degrees that we accept. Any degree that you can make you can make a determination for it being relevant to the work that we're doing is applicable. So the assignment process is that your first assignment is going to be directed. And then after that, which means that we tell you where you're going to be assigned. And then after that, you can bid on assignments as part of an open process. And that's just done every 2 years, right? So you get some role in determining where you're going to go in the long run. So just a little quick blurb on the civil service career tracks. These are some of these jobs, as you can see, are very similar to some of the other ones that we have in the foreign service job, but some are specific. So if you're interested in security, we are always looking for investigators and for folks on the security side. IT is another sector that we tend to look for folks in Washington. And I don't want to steal Alan's thunder, but I just want to say that State Department provides us, when we're co-located in the embassy, State Department provides some of these services for us, which is one of the reasons we don't need them in the field, particularly on the IT side and on the security side. And so internships, this is something I just want to go through quickly for you guys in hopes that if you're interested in USAID. We have multiple ways in which you can look at entering our civil service component. The Pathways Internship Program is one. And the Presidential Management Fellowship Program is another one. The PMF, I think everybody is probably pretty much aware of it. It really is the US government's broader perspective program for recruiting. And that is you have to apply within 2 years of graduating, and you get assigned to a US government agency. You get to do rotations. It's a really awesome intro into the US government. And at the end of that 2 years, you would get the possibility of getting long-term employment. And again, that is for civil service. And I do want to put a plug in for the Payne Fellowship. So this application period will be coming open this summer, this fall, I should say. And this program is amazing because it provides you with a 2-year graduate degree that is paid for by us. You get, and that payment includes your tuition, your fees, your living expenses, as well as 2 summer internships. And so you get an internship on the Hill 1 summer, and then you get an internship in a USAID mission overseas the 2nd summer. And then at the end of that, when you graduate from grad school, you get to become a USAID Foreign Service Officer. And so the only other programs I know that are similar to that are the ones that Alan's going to talk about, which are great, but ours is awesome. And the eligibility for it is that you have to have a 3.2 GPA and be planning to start grad school in the fall following your application. So for this, for example, that should say fall 2022, not fall 2021. Apologies for that. So if you're looking at going to grad school next year, definitely talk to me about the Payne Fellowship. For all of our jobs, you have to go, with the exception of the Payne Fellowship, you have to go to usajobs.gov to apply. I think I mentioned already that you do not have to, we don't use the Foreign Service Officer test, which I'm sure Alan is going to talk about. But we do want people to get more engaged. I am here, that's me in the picture there, with these cute little schoolgirls in Haiti. And I am here as a resource for you. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I do sit at Morehouse College, but I cover the entire region, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana. So you can definitely feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk more. One question I often get is how do you get more development experience? And you can get that through a variety of ways, right? The Peace Corps is a great way. Working for a non-government organization or sometimes contractors that are working in development is another way. If you are a citizen of another country, you can look at applying for positions that we have overseas. Sometimes we'll have positions overseas as well for American citizens. And so you can look at those. If you've worked in a disadvantaged community in the US, that's considered development experience because a lot of times the development challenges that they're having to deal with are similar to the ones that are happening outside the country. If you've studied or done research in developing countries, military experience, all of this stuff is relevant development experience. And so don't rule your own experiences out. Definitely assume that you're qualified. One other thing I should mention is that for our civil service positions, you're not required to have a master's degree. You're not required to have any degree for civil service positions. And so if you're interested in that, we can also talk through that. But you do need to be a US citizen in order to work for us. Because one of the reasons for that is because we require a clearance, a security clearance for all of our employees, including our interns. And that's another reason that our application periods tend to be so far out in advance, because we want to make sure that you get your security clearance in time for you to start your internship or your fellowship, et cetera. And I think I'm just gonna stop talking now, Tim. I've got a few more slides here, but I think I'm at my 20-minute mark. And I know you've got folks that are that want to ask some questions. So I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna let Alan take it over.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alexis. This is fantastic. Yeah, there have been some amazing questions coming in, and let's definitely make sure we save them for last, because I'm sure that what Alan is going to present very much aligns with and complements what you just presented. So thank you very much. And Alan, yeah, let's turn it over to you. And you're muted right now still.
Trying to make sure I'm unmuted. Okay, so can everybody see me okay?
Yes.
See the slideshow? There we go. All right, can you see the slideshow?
Yes.
Okay, so again, my name is Alan DuBose, and I'm a diplomat in residence with the U.S. Department of State. I'm based in Atlanta, and I am your point of contact for any questions you may have in the future about the U.S. Foreign Service. There are 16 of us spread across the U.S. I'll try to go through this presentation a little bit expeditiously. I was watching some of the questions come in, and I think it's valuable to kind of focus the energy on where the questions are coming in. So again, Alan DuBose, DIR-South@state.gov is the way to contact me. And you're going to hear me say repeatedly, careers.state.gov. This is an excellent site that goes through a lot of details about our careers and the paths. So if you do want to talk to me, the very first thing I'm going to say is, did you go to careers.state.gov and do your research? Because it'll really help you understand anything I'm going to talk about. So we're going to go through the roles, we're going to go through the careers a little bit, talk about skills and some of our student programs. And the reason I have this old clipping on this screen is this is what attracted me. Back in 2004, I was sitting in South Florida at my computer and I saw this ad pop up and I read it and I said, I'm an administrative person. I never thought that the U.S. Foreign Service was looking for administrative people. It just never really crossed my mind. And from that point forward, I moved into the process based on what it was telling me to do. And it's been a wonderful career. So real quickly about the Department of State. The Department of State has been around since 1789. We're the oldest agency, but what they did starting in 1924, start cobbling together the different functions within the Department of State and created the U.S. Foreign Service. So when you think of the Department of State, that includes the U.S. Foreign Service. Our civil servants are the ones who are normally based in the States, and they provide the support roles. Our mission is going to be with the U.S. Foreign Service at the embassies and consulates abroad. So we are the umbrella agency, the lead agency for the foreign affairs agencies. And as Ms. Butler said, we provide support. Think of us like the landlord in some regards. And then where there are other agencies that are foreign affairs agencies that may have a need in that specific country, we will help them provide some of the needs they have. Otherwise, we're headquartered in DC. We have 276 posts abroad spread across 191 countries. And you see the numbers don't add up. And the reason is because we have consulates. So think of an embassy as the headquarters in any one country. And then if US has extra interest in that country, like let's say Mexico, there are a lot of American citizens in Mexico. So the US will put consulates in the areas where you find the American citizens. And that's why you see a difference in those numbers. We are not a large agency, actually. We only have 14,000 Foreign Service officers or employees and 10,000 civil service employees. So that's 24,000 people who are Americans who are supporting the U.S. State Department. The big number you see are actually our locally employed staff. And those are people who are hired locally in that country. They may or may not be Americans, but they do a lot of the day-to-day work at those posts. So they are our archival knowledge. Think of us like the military. We go for a tour, 2 or 3 years later, we're out of there. Well, someone has to be the knowledge to hand off so the baton isn't dropped each time a foreign service officer enters or exits that country. And that's what the locally employed staff do. So we're going to talk quickly about the career options on becoming a U.S. Foreign Service diplomat. So there are really two paths. I'm not going to go into civil service. You can contact me if you've gone to careers.state.gov and want to talk about those options. I'm going to focus just on U.S. Foreign Service. There are really just two options. No matter what your major is, there are really just two options. And each of those options has a few more career paths within them. The first one I'm going to talk about is Foreign Service officers, and you can use the word generalist synonymously, and they require the Foreign Service officer to spend their career doing different things. So Alan is a management officer, but I've already done consular, I've done human resources, and I'm expected to do things other than management throughout my career. Why? Because in the hierarchy, as people move through their careers and move into the higher levels, leadership and supervisory skills become very, very important. So it's a lot easier to supervise staff if you know something about the work they're doing and how it fits in the organization. So that's why it's important for our generalists to be as plug and play as possible. And we have our own school. So we learn what we need to learn before we get out on any specific assignment. The other option is going to be our specialists. And the specialists, when they're hired, they are hired to do one thing. So a construction engineer, that person will be hired to be a construction engineer, and they will be expected to take that expertise wherever they go abroad throughout their entire career. So I'm going to go through a little detail on the officer tracks. Consular. Consular is what I call the retail, because if there is an American citizen abroad and let's say they lose their passport, they need help. The person they're going to talk to most likely if they go to the embassy is going to be a consular officer. And what the consular people do is they take care of the needs of any American citizens when they're in that home country. The other major role of our consular officers is issuing visas. So if foreign service nationals want to enter the United States, the first thing they have to do in many cases is actually set up an interview with the consular officer and have, during that interview, present enough information to make the consular officer feel comfortable that they are not going to just come to the US and stay. They will return to their home country. So those are the two major roles within the consular officer's work. Let's skip over to management. Again, management is what I am, and management is actually normally the largest office at a post. When I was a management officer in Dubai, I had about 77 people reporting to me. And the reason it's that large is because it's the catch-all for everything administrative. You have motor pool, you have facility managers, HR, logistics is in there, VIP visits, pretty much anything administrative or what you might find in the private world is going to fall under that management umbrella. We're the support for everybody else at the entire mission. We go down to public diplomacy, and I call public diplomacy the face of the State Department or the face of the U.S. Foreign Service. These are the speech writers, the people who interface with our journalists, the people who handle our social media. So the public diplomacy is our public face and communicates our messages publicly about the U.S. foreign interests. Now, I saved economic and political for last because I say these are essentially the same job. They're what we call reporting officers. So really, what's the difference? Economic officers report on economic issues. Political officers report on political issues. What do they report? Well, the U.S. Foreign Service does actually gather intelligence. We are not an intelligence agency. We're not gathering that covert sort of intelligence. We gather intelligence through open source, meaning you can find it anywhere if you know where to look. And then we also gather evidence, and this is really where these people earn their living, which is human intelligence, which basically means networking. It means they network, they find the movers and shakers in that country. They try to find something where they are going to help each other, and they gather information. Uncle Sam does not like surprises. So the job of an economic and political officer is to find out whatever's going on in a country well before it turns into an issue. Now, they also do the flip side. They not only send information to DC, but also DC disseminates information through them. So normally what will happen is if the White House has a message that they want delivered to the, let's say, the president or prime minister in another country, it's probably going to be a political or an economic officer that's going to be delivering that message if it's not the ambassador himself. So we talked about the generalists. Now we're going to talk about the specialists. There are a lot more options. So you see these 8 here, but there are about 19 total when you go through the details of each one of these. There are administrative roles. We talked about some of those that are going to be like finance or human resources. That's going to fall in this administrative umbrella. Construction engineers. Somebody has to build those embassies. Like Ms. Butler said, they're looking for engineers. We're looking for engineers. Facility managers. Once the embassy's built, someone has to take care of the garage, the blacktop outside. They have to take care of the facility. So facility managers. IT. We have a shortage of IT personnel. Why? It cost Uncle Sam somewhere around $700,000 for an average 3-year tour to send one of us overseas. So when we send people overseas as specialists or officers, they're going to be supervising. They're not going to be as hands-on. That's what the locally employed staff do. So when you're an IT person, you're not going to be sent overseas to do coding. You need to know something about the processes, but essentially your role is going to be supervising the people who are doing the hands-on work. And so our IT requirements are a little different than you might find in the private world, because the reality is, if there's anywhere in an embassy that higher level really doesn't know much, it's usually IT. So it's not unusual for that IT manager to have to be able to take a technical issue and physically walk into the ambassador's office and speak in a way that that ambassador can understand. So we're not just looking for the computer geeks, we're looking for the geeks who have other skills as well. Information language and programs. This is a small program that shares information about the U.S. government abroad. Medical and health. I saw a question in the chat. We do have medical providers. We hire nurse practitioners. We hire doctors, normally family physicians. We hire psychiatrists. We have nurses. It's kind of an inverse relationship. At the large post, let's say the Western European post, somewhere like Paris, the healthcare there is pretty much comparable to the States. So we're not going to have a big medical clinic there at that embassy. But if you go to some country, inadequate medical care, we will set up a clinic that is comparable to what you can find to a clinic in the US. And so what we do is we centralize our MDs. We'll have our doctors have regional responsibility for several countries, and they will travel throughout that country. So they might be on the road 50% of the time, and the other 50% of the time they're back in their office managing the staff. And then again, we're hiring nurse practitioners and others who see the patients. Office management, clerical, pretty much like it sounds. Law enforcement and security. You might not recognize it by that name, but people who watch movies will hear about diplomatic security. And DS is our security arm. As Ms. Butler mentioned, we provide a lot of support for anybody who's under our umbrella, and that DS is responsible for anybody who reports through the chain of command, through that ambassador. We call the ambassador chief of mission, so their job is to make sure everybody is safe. So I'm going to slow down just a little bit on this page. This is essentially what we're looking for. Now, when we're looking for specialists, they have to enter with those skills. They have to demonstrate in the process of hiring that they have the finance skills or the construction engineering skills. They're actually tested on that. However, foreign service officers are not tested. Nobody goes to school for consular work. This is something that's unique to us. So you can be a biology major and you can join to become a political officer if you can demonstrate that you're strong in what we call these 13 dimensions. So when we talk about preparing yourself for a career abroad and working in foreign affairs, this is crucial. Let's go through some of these real quick. I'm not going to go, but we're looking for people who demonstrate composure, dealing with change, cultural adaptability. If there's one that is more unique to a foreign affairs agency than anything else, it's this one. This simply says you can be the best at whatever you do in the States, best facility manager, number one in your class, you go work and you're doing a great job. But if we pick you up and take you to a country you've never been before, and you might be speaking in your second language and you have to get things done, are you going to crash and burn? Or are you going to adapt to the realities of what it's like to get things done in that country? And that's huge for us. We go through again and look at these others. I always think judgment is pretty much the umbrella, because when you go through all of these, ultimately, there will be gray. And we need people who are going to have to take imperfect information. They know they don't have enough information, but they have to make decisions. And so judgment is very, very important to us. So the one thing I will say is with these 13 dimensions, it doesn't matter if you don't work for the Department of State. It doesn't matter if you don't work for the federal government. It doesn't matter if you work in private industry, if you decide to be an entrepreneur. If you are solid in these 13 dimensions, you're going to position yourself for success. So I don't know who put these 13 dimensions together, but I wouldn't look at these as a state thing. I would look at these as something you should be developing as you become professionals moving forward, or entrepreneurs. So now I'm going to turn to student programs and try to go through this a little quickly so we have questions. We have our fellowships. By the way, all these deadlines have passed. So the fellowships for next summer will be the Wrangell and Pickering fellowships. These, Ms. Butler mentioned the PAIN. These are similar to those in the sense that they offer 2 years of paying for tuition for master's degrees. So eligible people would be people who are currently, well, this would be for next year, who would be seniors next year, or they would have already graduated. They receive an award of up to $42,000 annually for 2 years for that 2-year master's degree, and they are committed to 5 years of service, kind of like ROTC, once they finish the program. There's another program that's modeled after those called FATE, and this is similar. It's for IT. The only difference with this one and the Wrangell and Pickering, substantial difference, is that you can be an undergrad. So it will either pay for 2 years undergrad, normally your junior and senior year, or a 2-year master's degree if you've already graduated or will be graduating. Again, this comes with a 5-year commitment. Other student opportunities. Our general internship program is the U.S. Department of State internship program, not to be confused with U.S. Foreign Service internship program. The top one is the one where students during the summers normally, but there are opportunities throughout the year, but the bulk of them are during the summer. They could go abroad and be at an embassy, or they could actually be posted in the States. And the reality is they're not paid. And because they're not paid, a lot of people want to cut their costs. It might be fun to go to Buenos Aires, it might be exciting, but the reality is you can have a great experience if you can get an internship in DC. USFSIP is a program that essentially realized we were losing a lot of high quality students because they couldn't afford to not get paid something. So this was a program that's very competitive, but it was put together that pays the students and puts them through a training program as interns. The Wrangell Summer Enrichment Program deadline just passed. This is for undergrads. This is for freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and actually seniors. People who are currently in school could qualify for this, and this program does not come with a commitment when they finish, and it's pretty much training. It's allowing them to kick the tires. They spend the time at Howard University taking classes, and Georgia State may give credit for those classes. It's up to Georgia State, and you get paid for this. Plus, there's no commitment. So not surprisingly, our Wrangell Summer Enrichment programs, we call them scholars, when they finish the program, they're well positioned to compete for one of those fellowships if they choose to. Other students' opportunities, Ms. Butler mentioned the Pathways programs. We have Pathways as well. Pathways is a federal program for, you can read about it at usajobs.gov. So each agency has their own deadlines and what they're looking for pathways. And the last one I'll mention is VSFS, which is Virtual Service Student Federal Service Internship. It was created to be a virtual program. So this program did not change whatsoever with COVID. And this is another federal government program, not just Department of State. What it allows people to do is the student will commit 10 hours a week to working project type assignments throughout their school year. So every Monday I talk with my intern, give her assignments, and then she has 10 hours that week that she commits to getting those done. And that's pretty much what we're doing. So the one catch with this program is this opens July 1 and normally closes the last day in July. So you should go to careers.state.gov and put a tickler in there to notify you when all these student programs are going to open. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing so we can go to the questions. Hopefully I knocked out a few. Whoa, there are a bunch of things in here. So Tim, I'm going to turn it back to you about the questions and you just handle.
Thank you, Alan. This was absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate it. And yes, I sent to you and Alexius the like a summary of the most important questions. There were some amazing ones there. Just before I turn it over, just a couple of maybe very brief remarks. If any of you have very specific questions that pertain to your particular situation, or there were some questions about your background, about your citizenship, and academic background and so forth, please feel free to email Ms. Butler and Mr. DeBose directly and ask them, right? So, because it pertains really mostly to you. Just a couple of things that I found so compelling about today. Well, first of all, I think it became very clear that, we have a lot of global problems that require some global solutions. They're extremely complex. So both USAID and the State Department, of course, offer what I can see some career paths for pretty much anybody from all walks of life, backgrounds. And I think that's exactly what we need. And I think these two organizations really understand that the complex problems require very complex solutions with a broad range of people with different backgrounds. And one thing, though, I wanted to highlight, and this is kind of tying into what the work that CULTR does, is that, of course, what's very important is, cultural adaptability, language skills, just being able for anybody who's interested in a real global career to really have a solid foundation of being able to adopt different worldviews and understand people in other parts of the world, and to understand that your lived experience here in the United States is, of course, not going to prepare you really for living abroad. So there were a few questions about some of the career paths and the preparedness for the careers. And since we have those questions, Alexius, do you want to take a couple of those questions?
Sure. So I think I saw one question on how binding the career tracks are. So I should note that because your first assignment is a directed assignment, your assignment will be on that career track. So whatever it is. So if you enter the agency as an agriculture officer, then your first assignment will be as an agriculture officer. You do get the opportunity, depending on what's available and what country you're going to, you can look at moving into other areas. But again, because you're often entering as a technical specialist, some of those areas may be limited, right? So if you enter as an ag officer, you probably would have a tough time converting over to be a executive officer or a financial management officer. And the part of that is because while you will have been doing your work, learning more about USAID and agriculture, there will be other people that will be that will be doing that job already. And so you'll be competing against. And then there's some areas that just don't have any real overlap to them, right? And so, our contracting side, those folks often want to get more involved in the technical side, but again, they're competing with the people on the technical side who've been doing the job. And so choose your career track to be one that you're willing to work in for at least a portion of your career. And then you can look at transitioning over once you join the agency.
Great. Alan, there were a few that addressed.
Yeah, I can grab a few right now. I saw a certain theme there about changing career paths. The short answer is it's possible in some cases. However, it's not worth it to go with that intent. You pretty much have to make an argument. So less than 5% of our people are going to be able to go from one career track to another. We do have some people who go from foreign service to civil service and vice versa, but that's not the intent. So it does happen, but it's not planned that way as much as each case is kind of unique. So when you join the foreign service, you should try to make sure that your intent is to stay in that one career track through your entire career. Let's see. I'm going to go through a couple questions, if you don't mind, real quickly about these, because I see some common things. The way the posting works, Alexia's talked about your first tours. With ours, if you are hired, once you join, you spend your first couple of tours as an entry-level officer. Your first one, let's say there are 100 people in your class, there are going to be 100 jobs. So everybody's going to get one job on that list. Then the next tour you have will be limited to just people who are still considered entry-level officers. So there might be 500 jobs for 400 people, but you're just competing against people who are pretty much your grade. After that, it's wide open. So your first two tours, you have limited control over where you're going to go. You have some. And as a matter of fact, we're kind and gentle. So we sit and have a conversation with you and talk about your family and things like that. And that's how they make their first assignments. After you finish your first two tours, you're on your own. And some people choose to say, I want to stay in Latin America, whereas other people say, and I've heard this before, I do not want to touch the same continent consecutively. I just want to go everywhere in the world. And you can control that many times. You don't always get your first choice, but you can control that. I see a couple of questions about families. We have what are called, I just forgot, they're unaccompanied posts. Those unaccompanied posts are places like Kabul and Baghdad, where you are not allowed to take your family. Other than that, families are allowed to go, but sometimes they do have limitations, and you would know ahead of time. So if I looked on the list and said, oh, I think I want to go to Saudi Arabia, well, I could go there, and my family could go, but my family would be very restricted in Saudi Arabia at our post. So I would probably not bid on Saudi Arabia. So the overwhelming majority of the time, probably 90% of the time, your family's allowed to go with you, but you have control. If you don't want to go to those posts, don't go to those posts. That's pretty much it. You want to go ahead, Alexis?
I'll just add to that. So State Department has more posts around the world than USAID does. As I pointed out before, we're only in about 100 countries, and not all those countries are presence countries, which means that sometimes we're working from a neighboring country supporting programs there. But my son and my dogs have all gone with me to the posts that I have been able to take them to. For most part, in my experience, like the international schools that have been identified as the ones that the embassy kids will likely go to are fantastic educational institutions. And so it's a great opportunity. My son loved growing up in the Foreign Service. And I honestly thought as soon as he graduated from high school, he'd be on the first plane back to the US, but he decided to go to school in London instead of coming back to the US because he really was enjoying being a citizen of the world. And so I think it really just opens up your family's mind to the possibilities. And I also want to put out a plug. I'm originally from Atlanta, and I'm the only member of my family who actually lived outside of Atlanta at any point in time. And those people have learned so much about the world just from following me around. You know, that they initially had no idea. They couldn't even conceive of what housing was like in Africa or in Bangladesh. And so now they see where I live, and they visited me in some places. And so it really does have an add-on effect to your entire tribe in the US. So.
Right.
Can I real quickly, just for about 60 seconds, just a couple of check off the boxes. Part of our requirements are that you get a top secret clearance. Top secret clearance requires that you are a US citizen. Does not matter if you were naturalized or born in the US, that is the requirement. Language. It will never ever work against you to have a language, but it's not required. It's not expected. We have our own school. We teach the languages to you. So what we're looking for is people who can learn whatever languages they need to learn. Being a dual national is case by case. Diplomatic security looks at all of these issues in totality when they're looking at their clearances. So one other question, then I'll hand it back to you, Tim. Part-time position.
Alan, you there?
Oh, I think we lost Alan for a second, but then I'm going to take the opportunity to jump in on something that I wanted to say. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Sloan. Hi, Sloan, who asked about LGBTI engagement and those types of things. And I just want to say that as a democracy and governance officer, I love seeing people that are personally engaged in issues that they feel are important. So be it indigenous rights or LGBTI rights, et cetera, and that this is a priority for the US government overseas. So it is not a disadvantage at all for you if that is something that you're working on in the US. We encourage that because that honestly goes towards another question that somebody was asking, which is what do we look for? We look to see people, we look for people who have those issues that they're dedicated to and are acting on them. And so that is a great example of something. So I just wanted to put that out there. All right, I'll stop talking now, Tim.
Yeah, we only have a couple of minutes left. So I just wanted to ask one question that several people have been alluding to, and that is how do you organizations, or in this case, your organization, since we lost Alan for some reason, how do you deal with administration changes and leadership changes? And I believe that what this pertains to or refers to a lot is presidential administrations in particular. I mean, we went through 4 very different years from what we're looking at right now. What would you say to that, Alexius?
Well, you know, one of the great things about USAID is that we actually, because Congress determines how we spend our money and where we spend our money, we actually have been able to enjoy a large amount of bipartisan support throughout our 60-year history. And so we don't have a huge number of changes that happen from administration to administration. So some administrations may have priorities that we aren't already working on. For example, the Presidential Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, which is called PEPFAR. That was created under the George W. Bush administration, which was not an area that we had been focusing on. And so we added that into our programming. So there's other examples of that. But as far as like changes on the ground, we actually don't see a huge amount of change from administration to administration. The rhetoric may change in Washington, but like the actual programming that we're doing, Congress funds us years in advance. And so we're already kind of moving down a certain track. And I equate it to trying to change the direction of an aircraft carrier, right? Those giant ships. You know, it takes a while before you can recenter it to focus on something else. And so that's the way our agency also works. And I think it has worked in our favor for that reason. And again, I joined the agency under the W. Bush administration. One of the things that we did see up until this recent administration is that our development budgets were increased under Republican administrations and typically reduced under Democratic administrations. And so that was a trend we had been looking at. And then under the last Republican administration was the first time that there was an effort by a Republican to reduce our budget. And what happened was that because Congress makes the final determinations, our budgets ended up going up. And so again, having like that, basically having 2 feet in two different sections of the government, being the executive as well as the legislative, it really has helped us to maintain stability.
Perfect. It's fascinating to hear that. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. Actually, our time is up. So I just wanted to thank you and in absence also, Alan, really for taking the time and sharing your expertise with us. But I think it's been absolutely fascinating. I understand that many of you will still have other questions that we didn't have a chance to answer. So please feel free to reach out to both speakers today and ask them your questions. And I know they're very responsive. They're eager to help you, and hopefully something will come of it. So all of you, thank you for participating in the Global Career Series. The next event in the series will be 12 to 1 p.m. on Thursday on the 26th. That's next week. And there's also, you can register for the event at this link that I just posted here. So again, thank you all very, very much for being here, for sharing an hour with us, and we'll see you at the next event. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.